Hi, everybody. So, we're going to have a look at the law of supply. We've already had a look at the law of demand, and obviously, we need to understand how the law of supply works as well. So, this is part of Unit 1, Area Study 2, Decision Making in Markets. Well, just like the law of demand, the law of supply basically tells us what's going to happen when certain things occur. So, for this situation, if the price of an item goes up, as a producer or a supplier, we're going to attempt to maximize our profits. So we'll increase as much of that particular good or service as we can and offer it up for sale. So the more expensive something becomes, the more likely we are to try and produce it and get it out into the market and make as much profit off it as we can. That's essentially what the law of supply is. So the price of something goes up, suppliers are going to try and supply as much of it as they can. An easy way of thinking about it is just this. As a producer, we're far more willing to produce something that is going up in price than something that was going down. So the higher the price of the product means we're going to make more profit. And obviously, as a producer, if something is going up in price, that's the encouragement we need to actually increase the supply of that product. It also works the other way. If the price is falling, we have less incentive to actually supply that product. So you might think about it at the moment. If I was able to supply personal protective equipment, medical supplies, gloves, face masks, etc., we'd make as many of them as we could because we know there's a lot of demand for them. The price is going up, so we'd try and supply as many of them as we could. The law of supply basically looks like this in terms of the chart. You'll notice it's the opposite direction or slope to the demand graph. The supply side graph or the supply line always slopes up from the bottom left. In this situation, as you can see, as the price goes up, point 1, price 1, 2 and 3, the amount we're willing to supply goes up as well. So obviously the more we can supply at a higher price, the more encouragement we actually have to do that. And this works in everywhere actually, if you look around for it. If we think about us as a worker, if our boss is going to pay us more money to work overtime, then we're more willing to work those hours simply because we're going to earn more for it. And the same thing with you guys. You would have chosen certain subjects based upon getting into certain courses, to get into certain occupations. The more they pay, the more willing you are to put in those hard yards. So to become a surgeon or a lawyer, you might be working a long time at university to get those skills, but you know that ultimately you'll be well rewarded for that effort. So basically, as a business, as we've said here, if the price of something is going up, the encouragement for us is to supply more of that particular product. It works with the law of demand because it helps us to understand how businesses are actually thinking, not so much just consumers as well. And it helps us understand that, I guess, we need to put ourselves sometimes in the shoes of the supplier and think, well, what's in it for us to supply certain goods and services to the market? Just like with demand, we talk about contraction and expansions of supply. So that's when we're having any change to supply based only on prices. But we're also going to talk about supply shifts, and this is where something outside of price is actually determining whether we produce more or less of a particular item. So an expansion of supply can be seen in this particular chart. If there's a rise in price, it's causing expansion of supply. So if we think about the price of coffee, if the price of coffee goes up, and what's actually happening is, as a supplier, we're being encouraged to produce more coffee or to supply more coffee because we know we can sell it at a higher price. And obviously, the more we sell, the more profit we make. So it's a good example of how, in this situation, supply has expanded. And as we can see on the left, the first example is another example, I guess, of supply expanding. simply due to price. And the second example on figure 2.22 is an increase in supply. So what we actually have on the second graph is an actual new supply curve. You'll notice it's supply 1, and that is a supply shift because something has happened to increase the supply of that particular product, but it wasn't a price change. So we actually have a shift in supply. We're actually producing more of whatever that particular item is, and you'll notice that we're selling more of it at the same price. So we've gone from quantity 1 to quantity 2, supply has shifted, and we're selling more of that particular product at the same price. So one of the things that might have happened, and it's always one of the more obvious things, is if technology has improved and we can produce whatever it is we make at a cheaper or more efficient way, then we can actually produce more without prices actually changing. Contraction of supply is exactly the opposite of its expansion. So a fall in price would lead to a fall in supply, results in a downward movement curve. So in this case, we've got a contraction of supply where prices, if you like, are falling. We're not going to supply as much, in this case, coffee. So we're going to have a contraction of supply, and you'll notice that we're moving down the supply curve. We have, if you like, contracted along the supply curve. So a contraction of supply, as we saw on the previous slide, we've gone from one price and we've actually contracted down. As a supplier, we're not keen to keep supplying at that particular price because we can't sell enough of it. So we're going to reduce the price, and we'll also reduce the quantity that we're actually selling. In this situation, the quantity will go down simply because contraction or supply has contracted. On the second chart, 2.23, we've actually got, as you can see, another supply curve. So in this situation, supply has shifted to the left, which means we're now supplying less of that particular product, but it was for a reason unrelated to price. So as you can see there, the quantity supplied has gone from quantity 1 to quantity 2. So supply has actually shifted to the left when we have a new supply curve on that chart. So we're going to take a look at some of the factors that would be known as supply factors that will actually cause supply to shift when everything else, including when the prices actually stayed the same. And we have to remember as well that even though we're talking about suppliers, we are actually still talking about the way we would react as a consumer. So just like consumers react to demand conditions, producers always react to supply conditions as well. And I guess it's important to always remember that there are shifts in demand as well as shifts in supply. One of the things that technology allows us to do is that for some businesses, they can become very efficient. So if increased efficiency is a factor, it means we can produce goods and services much more efficiently than we did previously. Amazon is a fantastic example of that. They've got automated warehouses where you might have seen some of them. They have increased their efficiency, it reduces their costs. On the other hand, sometimes efficiency doesn't actually improve, and as a result of that, costs become higher. So particularly this might be the case where we don't have much technology in a particular industry, or where workers aren't being as productive as they might be in other places around the world, and efficiency starts to fall. If we're growing something that requires really good weather, well, if we have fantastic weather conditions, that might make a really good supply of a particular agricultural product. So we might have a lot of sunshine, some really good rainfall, and all our agricultural products are able to be produced far more efficiently than they have previously, simply because we had great conditions. However, as you can see, earlier this year we had some terrible fires in Victoria, and as a result of that, many crops and other products that are produced in those areas weren't able to be produced to the same extent, and as a result of that, a lot of Unfavourable climatic conditions, I guess, have impacted negatively on supply of some products. If bankruptcy rates fall, if that means that people aren't actually going broke, and if profitability increases, normally it means that the quantity of a good or service supplied will also be increased. But as we've said, on the other hand, if bankruptcies actually increase, business profitability falls, we generally tend to have a decrease in supply of that good or service. And that might be something we notice at the moment. And the final supply conditions we'll talk about is government assistance. So, when the government lowers taxation on businesses, that tends to encourage them to produce more and to supply more. Likewise, if governments increase taxes on products or the way businesses produce those products, that means that their costs have gone up and they're probably less likely to supply more of that particular product. So, guys, make sure you go back, have a look at those slides. We have been talking about supply conditions, and I guess having looked at supply conditions in this particular set of slides, you can then not compare them, but you can actually put them together with the demand conditions, and we'll start to analyze exactly how demand and supply operate.